in the fall of 2019. And so we're just a few years old, and we have some exciting changes in the program that Dr. Laura Eigel will talk about this evening. But we're really excited about this program and excited to talk to you about it and answer any questions that you have about it. I'll just say, you know, our being a part of our program means that you'll be exposed to people with a lot of experience working in industry in organizational psychology positions, where you'll have great coursework and training opportunities and internship opportunities. You'll have classes with top researchers in research study design and analysis as well, where you're well trained in this field, and it's a really exciting thing. And Dr. Laura Eigel is one of those experts, and she is the director of this program. And we'll have a couple of other folks who are associated with the program on the call tonight as well. So just welcome. We hope you find this informative, and if this is of interest to you, we would love to see your applications to the program. So thanks, Laura.
Thank you so much, Justin. Well, I want to go through a couple of things that will go over our time together today. So I'm Laura Eigel. I'm the program director of the MS program in organizational psychology here at SMU. And we want to cover a couple of these topics as we dig in. So first, we're going to talk about some of the career options in organizational psychology and clarify a couple of things based on some of the questions that we usually get from students. Then we want to talk a bit more about our program. So our course offerings and more specifically, our applied internships. After that, we'll take a couple of minutes to talk through application process and our admission criteria, deadlines, all that kind of stuff. And after that, we're going to open it up to Q&A. We're going to start with introductions with a couple of key faculty members that are on the call today, and then also some students as well. So you can get their perspectives on their experience and their internship experience as well. So we're going to dive in, and I would suggest if you have a question as we go, if you can drop it in the chat, and then we're going to save questions till the end. If it's something that I can incorporate as we go, I'll do so if possible, but otherwise we'll hold questions for the end, and we have, we'll ensure that we stick around to ask all of those. So first, what do we mean when we say practitioner career options in organizational psychology? So first and foremost, organizational psychology or industrial organizational psychology is all about scientifically based solutions for the workforce and the workplace. And the key here for our program is really on application to the applied setting. So when we talk about practitioners, we're going to talk about, this difference. What is that practitioner path versus an academic path? Practitioner path, I want to give you a couple of examples of some of those roles versus an academic path. An academic path would be working in a university setting. Part of my job is actually a little bit of mostly practitioner, but a little bit of academic because I also teach as adjunct faculty in the program, but mostly I'm a practitioner. We'll also talk a little bit about where does this kind of sit within the function of human resources? Is this a human resources job or not? So let's spend a couple of minutes there. So practitioner roles. When we think about this, these are roles within a company. Either you are working within a company as an employee, almost like an internal consultant, or as an external consultant. These are some roles that you might have, working in selection of employees or in the talent acquisition and recruitment to get the right employees in a company. It might be the assessment of employees, whether on the selection end or as we assess for development opportunities or promotions within a company. It might be talent management. How do we select the right people within the jobs to get the promotions? How do we set goals within an organization? How are we, investing in different people through learning and development and training programs? There's also applied jobs in change management, organizational culture and survey. There's leadership development, coaching, and specifically also diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging has seen a rise in specific practical jobs within organizational psychology. And a lot of these are within the human resources function. So as you think about apply, that's what we mean. You're learning and then you're applying within an organization as either a consultant or an internal employee. So we often get this, and I get this question a lot. Is this in HR? Because I don't want to be in HR. I actually had that thought myself when I was a psychology undergrad. I remember a specific conversation I had with my father, and he said, I think you would be great to go into HR. And I said, I don't think I want to do that. And I really didn't understand what HR was. I thought it was something that was very administrative and tactical. And I didn't think I wanted to do a job like that. So what is a traditional kind of HR job? When we think of HR, we think of kind of this path of human resources generalist, or often called human resources business partner. And I'll tell you, they do run the daily function of the strategy or the department or the company, but they support business units within the company. So that it could be tactical things or very strategic things, like the talent strategy that aligns with a business strategy. It could be hiring, interviewing, administering pay or benefits or compensation, like lots of these kinds of processes and policies to make the workplace fair, safe, and equitable. It might be more administrative, or it could be very strategic. And I think that really depends on the maturity of the HR function and the maturity of the company. So for instance, if you're a startup, you probably have a very small HR, you might not have HR at all. You might have a couple of HR people, but they're at a lower level of maturity, an early stage of a department, versus a Fortune 50 company, which has probably a very high level of a mature HR department and are doing more strategic things. You could have a whole career as a human resources generalist. Also in HR, we have specialists, and traditionally within big companies, this is where the practitioner roles for organizational psychologists kind of live. It's an umbrella under HR, but you're considered a specialist. And so you have a deeper expertise in some of these things. So you might be an expert in selection, or you might be an expert in training and development or training and design. But those are career options that you can have within one company or go across multiple different companies to grow your career in that specific specialization as that specialist. You can do that as a consultant. You can do that as an internal employee. But generally, you are still considered part of the HR organization as a whole. And it's really interesting when people kind of see you as part of HR, they sometimes don't distinguish between a generalist or a specialist. So you do have to know a little bit about everything once you're in the global umbrella of HR. And often some of these specialist roles, and I consider myself a specialist within learning and development, and often the human resources business partners are your key stakeholders. And so even if you're not on a generalist path, you might work very closely with HR generalists because they're one of your key clients and constituent groups, because they have they're with those employees and they understand their day-to-day lives more, since they're in that generalist path and supporting them as a function. So that's kind of the difference between HR as a generalist path versus HR as a specialist path. And sometimes these paths cross. You might be a specialist that gets an experience as a generalist, or a generalist that gets an experience as a specialist. But generally, as a practitioner, we would consider the jobs that our students get in kind of the specialist practitioner career path. All right, so now that we have that kind of foundation, I want to go into a little bit more about how do we set our students up for success to get those kinds of jobs and to have that career path. So our course offerings and our applied internship are ways that we do that and set you up for success. So our program is a 36-hour program. It's cohort-based, and it's to be taken over a time span of about 1.5 years. So we're excited that it is a STEM designation. And we do have a requirement of an applied internship, where I'll talk about in a minute. And it is a non-thesis program, so no thesis requirement. Really, we are really wanting you to place that emphasis on practical application instead of thesis. So here's an example schedule. So the first year is really focused on coursework and electives. I'll show you a couple of those in a bit. And then in that summer, after 1 year of coursework, we want that to be dedicated to a full-time internship. And that's a paid internship for 8 to 10 weeks. And we'll help you get that as well. And then after your internship ends, you have one remaining semester that's basically finishing up the required coursework. So that's the 1.5 years in total. So here's a couple of example course offerings that we had. To Austin's point from the beginning, lots of advanced coursework in practical application, in organizational theory, legal diversity issues at work, lots of applied methods and assessment at the individual and organizational level. And some of these are taught within the psychology department, some are taught within the business school, and there's other electives that are also available across other graduate schools at SMU too. So our program is really to be taken as full-time. And so as we think about some of these course offerings, some of them might be scheduled during the day, some at night, but the idea here is that you have a pretty full course load each semester to then build towards your internship in the summer. We're excited that we're offering 2 new classes in this fall and spring term for 2023-2024 with employee recruitment and selection, and then also the professional issues in practice and organizational psychology. So let's talk a bit about our applied internships. Being located in Dallas has tremendous advantages for our students to be part of the Dallas Metroplex. There's so many companies that are headquartered here. And part of my role is to build some of these beneficial long-term partnerships with companies across not only Dallas, but other companies in the US. So some of these internships are dedicated to our students on a competitive basis. And I'll just try to explain what that means. So we're building partnerships with companies directly with SMU. So when they do open those opportunities up, they're really for our students. So your competition is other students in your cohort. We really try and get to know students and understand what their passions are to help match them with the right companies and the right internships, so that you can really gain applied experience through those internships. And then hopefully the idea is making that, then having those as pathways to careers at those companies as well upon your graduation. So a couple of example internships that our students have recently secured, and we have some students on the call today. One is at PepsiCo, one is at Diversified. We've also had students work at Texas Instruments and a couple of other places. So they've gotten competitive internships through our partnerships and on their own as they've applied to internships that are just really interesting to them. And as we think about internship, we want you to really get an understanding of what you like and what you don't like. You might find that you want to go into one area, then you get an opportunity and an internship to really dig into a couple of specializations within a company, and you might find something you love even more. So we're really trying to get internships that have multiple things that you're exposed to within an HR team or a talent management team to give you an understanding of the different kinds of roles that you might be able to have. And then also just a last couple of things, internships are full-time within that summer. And we really want you to gain a really good working experience, something else to add to your resume as well. And you will have hopefully a dedicated manager. And then I also check in periodically throughout the semester to ensure that we're all still on the same page with manager and that you have everything that you need to be supported as well. So within the program, the next step really is to get some applicants. So that's why you're here, right? We want to learn, we want to tell you about the program, and we want to tell you about the process. So our admissions is through the Moody School of Graduate and Advanced Studies, and we are accepting applications with the deadline of March 31st. So this is for fall admissions and for that cohort. So a couple of things that we're looking for there is a personal statement. There's an essay as well to really understand what specialization or part of organizational psychology you're most passionate about. We're also looking for 3 letters of recommendation, some transcripts, and just to mention also that we do not have a GRE requirement at this time. And then for any international students, we do have a couple other things that need to be submitted, but we also have some really great resources on campus for international students as well. So that prioritized deadline of March 31st, what does prioritize mean? It really means that there's not a hard and fast deadline, but those are the ones that we'll look at first. We'll continue to accept applications until the end of the semester. So I wanted to spend most of our time today really with key introductions of faculty and students, and then we'll have room for Q&A. So I wanted to invite a couple of us to get off of mute if possible. I'll introduce myself again first, and then I'll call on a couple other of the faculty that are here today to talk to you a little bit more about their careers and what they teach. And then after that, we'll highlight several of our students so they can share about their experiences as well. So again, my name is Laura Eigel. I'm the program director, and I mentioned before that I have a little bit of an academic path, but mostly a practitioner path. So I have my PhD in applied psychology from Southern Illinois, and I have over a 20-year career mostly as a practitioner, and I have worked at companies like PepsiCo and Frito-Lay North America, really specializing in selection and coaching, and mostly in training and development, where I led the commercial teams for PepsiCo and the learning and development teams there and I was there for over 12 years. I then was the chief learning officer at YPO, and now I am a consultant and coach, and work with small and mid-sized companies to build their leadership pipelines. And specifically, I also coach women to advance different diversity in the C-suite. So, and then I also love to teach as well. So I've been working at SMU for about a year, and I teach the organizational psychology graduate class. So I'd love to have and invite Scott to introduce himself next.
Hello there. So my name is Scott Boyd. I've been teaching as a part-time adjunct at SMU for a year. This is my third course now. The course that I taught at the graduate school was program evaluation. I can see there's some of my students from last fall are on the call. They're great. I have been in practice since 2003. So I worked at a small management consultancy in Wisconsin for about 2.5, 3 years while I was finishing my doctorate. I worked for Safeway Corporate for about 3 years, which was in the Bay Area, focusing on primarily selection and assessment. I then worked more notably as the key industrial psychologist for Best Buy, where I did a whole bunch of work, but most of it was on employee research and surveys, selection and assessment, and litigation support, which is my main area of, well, the area I like most anyway, was litigation type work. And then I worked for a little bit at Allstate and PepsiCo here in Dallas, and then I've been at Verizon for the last 4 years doing a lot of selection and assessment work. I started teaching back in 2003 at the University of Wisconsin, just by happenstance, and I really enjoyed it. And then there was a long break, and then I started at St. Olaf College when I lived in Minneapolis back in 2012. And then I've basically just been teaching as an adjunct at various universities since then, just because I enjoy it. I like helping students and mentoring them and just helping guide them to make good decisions in their lives and kind of help hone the next generation of professionals. And it's just it's humbling for me when I see other students that I've had go on and do really great things. So really happy at SMU, and I'm hopeful to have a long-term impact here. It's nice to meet you. Thank you for coming.
Thank you so much. Chris, do you mind introducing yourself?
Hi, I'm Chris Logan. I've been in the psychology department at SMU for a little over 20 years. My PhD is in experimental psychology with a specialization in social. I have additional graduate training in mediation, conflict resolution, and teach one of the courses within the program, which is the advanced applied social class. And I've also done a lot of advising within the program and helping everybody kind of get through and navigate the curriculum and some of the intricacies of administration within SMU, figuring out how to make everything work out for everybody.
Thank you so much. I'd love to invite some of the students that are on with us to come on camera if you can and introduce yourselves. And I'd love to hear from you in terms of what has your experience been like as in a cohort-based program? And then if you could tell us a little bit about your internship experience that you've gained. Awesome. Catherine, do you mind going first?
Yeah, I can get us started. Hi, everyone. My name is Catherine Palmer. I'm in the program, so I'm getting my master's in organizational psychology. I'm in with my last semester, so I graduate this upcoming spring. For internships, I did an internship this past summer at Texas Instruments as a human resources intern, and I worked on projects within compensation, talent development, HR operations, and then recruiting. And then just this semester, I got an internship with PepsiCo, thanks to Dr. Eigel. And I consulted with Scott as well on the internship. So through this program, I've gotten this internship, and I actually have my first meeting tomorrow with my manager. So that's going to be exciting. And that's a little bit about me. For the cohort program, I've really enjoyed having a cohort model. Our cohort is quite small, but we're all pretty close. We always stay after class and talk, and then we always go out together to get like dinner, or we've gone to some football games. So having a cohort-based model is really nice, especially when we take classes in other departments. We're there for each other in an environment that's unfamiliar outside of the psychology department. And it's great having some friends while you go through graduate school.
Thank you so much. Wesley, do you want to go next?
Yes, I can follow. Hello, everyone. My name is Wesley Giadalor. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm also graduating this May with, the Master's in Organizational Psychology, and talking a little bit about the cohort experience. I echo a lot of Catherine's sentiments. I think there's lots of benefits to having a small cohort. There's just more one-on-one interaction with your professor, and that allows for more deep insights and deep learning. And so really glad I've gotten the chance to experience that. And also, I think the mix of courses in different schools, such as like Dedman and the business school, really allows you to see what you like and dislike and exposes you to different career paths and opportunities. So I think that's really beneficial. And talking a little bit about my internship experience this past summer, I worked as a consultant at a large firm, and I was specializing in change management and organization development. And so really helping other companies realize their change efforts when moving over to a different cloud. And so I got some experience being an external consultant, but throughout the internship, I also had some experience being an internal consultant for the firm. And so I worked on some projects as far as learning and development for the firm and trying to improve some of their initiatives. And so I think if you're wanting to go into the field of study of organizational psychology, there's lots of different career paths you can take. And yeah, I think this program is a great opportunity to explore those interests.
Thank you so much. Electra, do you mind sharing?
Yes, of course. Hi, everyone. I'm Electra Lebel, and as Wesley and Catherine, I'm graduating this May. So I did my undergrad at Northwestern, and I was really lucky, and I really liked the fact that we had a small cohort for this master's program, because I didn't know many people here, and having, as Wesley said, smaller classes, you get to know your professors and you actually dive deep into like material, and you get your professor's experience, like working experience. And I'm also really happy that you had the internship requirement, because as you said, like the human resources areas are so many. And I think it's really valuable for us as interns to experience the different areas that we're interested in and see what we like to do after graduation. So I had one internship right coming in fall of 2021 with Digital Factory, and there I mostly did talent acquisition with them. And now with the help of Dr. Eigel as well, I got an internship with Diversified, and it's more on data analysis, which is something that really interests me. Once I was in the program, like I had no idea what data analysis was before that. And we're gonna launch an engagement survey in March, and I'm gonna be part of it in crafting the questions and getting the results and creating action items. So I'm really excited.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing your experience with us, and thank you to the other students as well. I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and I'd love to open it up to any questions that anyone might have for faculty, students, any questions you might have about admissions. While you start thinking about questions, because I know you have them, I'd love to, I'm gonna ask one to get us started. I had mentioned before about we have different things that SMU does to help support students. And I wanted to see if, Chris, do you mind mentioning a couple of the things and supports that SMU has, especially for international students?
Oh, absolutely. As part of this program, you have access to basically everything that SMU has to offer. We have a dedicated office for international student scholar and support. We've got access to the full financial aid office. The program is a designated STEM program, as you mentioned. So there's a lot of different sort of resources available to help students get through. In addition to the department resources, we have all of our sort of facilities within the Moody School, which is basically overseeing a lot of the graduate programs at SMU. We have lots of levels of support to basically help make sure that everyone is able to not just get through, but get through with a really hopefully positive experience. And we've also got access to the Career Center on campus. So connections, not necessarily just in Dallas area, but we've got students that have used our Career Center to find, for example, one has a job in California as a graduate of the master's program, and the Career Center on campus was a helpful resource for that as well.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Well, we'll leave it open for questions, but I'd love to ask students, what questions did you have coming in that you think were obviously answered by the time you got there, but when you were in the applicant's kind of position, what kinds of things were you kind of wondering about?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. One of the things I was curious about was just some simple application requirements as far as, who should I send my letter of recs to? How should I go about my personal statement? And, lucky enough, I had some great mentors to, be able to speak about that with. And yeah, I would love to hear, I guess, administrative and faculty's perspectives on, students coming to them and, how they're willing to give letters of recommendations and support students throughout that process.
I love those questions. I can speak from my experience. I love giving letters of rec, and I've done so for a couple of students. And so I would say for letters of recommendation, think about classes that you've loved, people that you've worked for within, if you volunteered in any research capacity, those kinds of things. I'd even love to see letters of recommendation from any employers that you might have had, any jobs, any managers, those kinds of things. But I think traditionally, usually it's people that you've taken their classes and you have excelled in them and they feel comfortable writing you a letter of recommendation. I'd love to hear thoughts from Austin and Chris and Scott, what your perspectives are on that too.
Chris, you want to go? Yeah, go.
I was reading the comments over here right at the end. Can you repeat the question? I'm sorry, I was focusing on what the chat questions were.
About
sure.
letters of rec. Yeah.
I mean,
I'll take first crack at that. I mean, I think you want to get letters of recommendation from people who know you well enough that they can speak to your strengths and speak to experiences that they've had with you, working with you. Sometimes that's from professors, right, that can speak to sort of your your academic capabilities. And I think what Laura talked about too, if you've had sort of work experience that might be, even if it's sort of broadly relevant to that can be really helpful as well. But I think just generally, I think as a general rule, letters of recommendation that are specific and it's clear that this person sort of knows you is a good starting point.
Anything else to add to that, Scott or Chris?
Kind of concur. You definitely want to figure out people that are able to actually write a good letter for you that know something about you. So we're not expecting people to have multiple letters from organizational psychology faculty necessarily, or somebody who taught you in multiple organizational kinds of courses. It's really somebody who can talk about your sort of ethics, competency, ability to kind of persevere, writing ability, analytical ability, someone who can really kind of address your strengths and qualities rather than necessarily just somebody who can assess your potential within the field of organizational psychology.
Yeah, the two, I would say, primary qualities that I look for in the students that I teach are, you could call it either humility or coachability, because it's kind of hard to coach people if they're not open to that. So humility or coachability and work ethic.
Nice.
That's because I push my students pretty hard, because when they leave, my goal is I need to be able to say that they're better than the other people that they're competing with for jobs. And then once they have that job, I want them to be better than at least most of the other people that they're competing against. I've had that same mentality with people I've mentored for the past 10 plus years, and it's worked very, very well. So for me, it's humility and work ethic.
That's great. Okay, I see we've got some questions now. Thank you. I knew you just all needed a minute before you came to them. How many people are in each cohort? Some cohorts are smaller. Our current cohort is 10 in this last, but there's been smaller cohorts with the students that you see here, as small as 4 or 5 as well. So I think we're really trying to get to the kind of around 10 to 15 as we continue to grow the program. So it's still pretty small. Classes are very small. So you get that kind of one-on-one and kind of group, and then each class that you take. Another question from Smita, understanding that this is a full-time program, are there plans for professional or certificate programs as the program matures? It's a really great question. And at this point, it's not in the immediate future. We really want to get the program off the ground before we start doing any other things. But within SMU, there's other options as well. And happy to share some of those with you after the call. Thank you for that question. The next question is understanding if research is conducted. So, and Wesley mentioned that we should ask a lecturer to answer this one for us. If you don't mind, a lecturer telling us your experience with the research.
Yes, of course. So I needed to be full-time because I'm international for last semester, and I had taken electives, so I decided to take a class and do research for the class. And basically it was an MNO course through Cox, and I worked closely with Professor Butts, and I wrote a literature review because he had already done the research and he had the data on it. So I didn't have to gather the data for that. But I read a bunch of articles, and it was basically on work engagement before and after COVID, and how that has changed, and how the workplace will look like after COVID. Like the new normal is not going to be the same as the previous normal. And I think it was really interesting because I got a lot of information on the changes that have been made and on the changes still going on, basically, because we haven't settled in something yet. And so I wrote my literature review. It was about a 15-page paper. And I know now Professor Butts is in Europe doing work, but we said, like, I was really interested in continuing this. So I'm gonna keep doing research with him now that I want to see the data, because it did take a lot of time for me to read the articles and work with him, and we wanted to do a good work. So we're still continuing this even without a class credit. So there are opportunities for research as well.
Yeah, I would add, while it's really we're focused on practical rather than research, there still is research that is done within the university. There's not a ton of research done within faculty in psychology because we are also practitioners. And so, however, I will say that there's still research done in the organizations that we work within. And so not traditional research, but there are opportunities. And, you know, just some of this advanced coursework as well is applied research methods and applied social psychology as well. So there's opportunities within the broader organization of psychology with some of the other professors and in the business school as well, as the lecturer has talked about, although our primary focus is really applied work. Great question.
We do have a lot of the application, but we also did have a previous cohort too that was really deeply involved in basically all sort of phases of a major research project on best practices in the workplace. So we try to have flexibility so you can get as involved with research or application as you want. We don't necessarily have just one set sort of plan or path for you. There are different ways that you can put things like electives together, internships together. And Electra had a pretty unique experience with being able to be a little bit more hands-on one-on-one with a practitioner doing research.
Another question that's in the chat is from someone that's in a current IO program, but they're a Mustang at heart. So are they able to transfer credits? That is a really great question. And I am going to see if Chris or Austin can take this one.
That's a Chris question.
At this point, we do not actually have a set number of credits that we would have an answer to in terms of how many transfer credits we would be able to accept. Graduate courses don't tend to transfer as easily as undergraduate courses do, but that is actually something that we are working with the Moody School to kind of figure out a policy that we would have posted available through the program website, hopefully in the next few weeks.
Yeah, so I think that's one that if you want to reach out to us directly, that could be something that we start to look into for you. And a really great way to get us is the email orgpsych@smu.edu. Another question someone had is, where should we direct those who write our recommendations to send them? That's all done through the application process online. So what happens is that you put in who is giving your recommendation, and then they get sent an email to fill out that form and provide that recommendation for you. So that's all automated through the system. What else?
I added the link to the program information, which has a second link to get to the actual application materials and page in the chat.
And I love, Scott, your comment there in terms of, answering questions about what it's like to work as an internal consultant for a big company or an external consultant as well. I think a couple of us can speak to that on the call too. So if there's any questions based on just kind of career stuff too, we're happy to answer those questions if you have any of those.
I'll pose it. What are sort of the general differences of working internally in a company versus working as an external consultant? Kind of what are the pros and cons of each?
How long do you have? So the pros and cons. So I think you have personal and professional. So from a personal lens, if you work as an external consultant, generally speaking, I understand that there's going to be differences according to firm, but typically when you work external, of course, you're working with a large number of clients, which oftentimes means you're going to work some pretty long, hard hours, and you're probably going to be traveling a lot. Now, that has changed a little bit in recent years when people leverage Zoom and online meetings and things like that, more so than they have in the past. But that's typically one area. A benefit of external consulting oftentimes is you're getting exposed to many different companies and many types of industries, but you're not necessarily going really deep, right? Because you're working on one project for one firm, another one at another firm, and so on. When you work internally, one of the advantages, at least in most instances, is you don't necessarily have to work a crazy number of hours, and you don't necessarily have to travel as much. And you typically can go pretty deep in that industry. There also is typically more upward movement, if you will, if you want to become, let's say, a director or a vice president or something like that. There's obviously more responsibility involved in that. I've always been more, well, after I finished my position when I was finishing my doctorate, I've always worked internally, and I've preferred that. Another piece that's, to me, been advantageous is that when you work as an external consultant, really you're also in a sales role, because your job is to bill clients and to try to get their business, right? So there's that pressure to sell the services that in some cases those firms may not even offer. When you work internally for the firm, you don't have to sell anything, other than, of course, your own brand to the people you work with. But your job is to do the best job that you can for your company. It doesn't really, matter who you work with, as long as you're purchasing the best service from the best vendor. So there's, I think, for me anyway, there's always been more of an emphasis on being able to do quality work and being able to say no to external consultants who might want to do work that isn't necessarily bad, but not as good as it could be. So I've always preferred internal over external. It's a great question.
Yeah, I've
Laura,
had,
anything to add to that?
yeah, I had lots of varied experiences too. I started my career as a consultant, and to Scott's point, it was very project focused, lots of travel, which was really fun in that stage of my life. But what was missing was I wanted to know what happened. Like, what was the end result of this project that I had poured all of this time in, right? And I met all of these great subject matter experts. And what I loved about it was getting to know different businesses. That was the best part. And then the colleagues in a consulting firm are some of I still keep in touch, and some of those people are some of the greatest peers that I continue to have. But I missed the long-term, like, what happened. And so I switched to an internal career, and that's where I really decided that, man, that is what I need to do. That's where it is for me. My career satisfactions kind of skyrocketed because I found that I could be a part of the company, and I could, impact people's careers at the company. And so having a sense of belonging to that company was really exciting, to be able to make it even better as a specialist within the company. So I loved that. And I worked at Frito-Lay and PepsiCo for 12 years. And then I left to be at another leadership role at another company in the C-suite, where we built capability for other people. It was almost like another consulting firm. It was interesting. It was really cool. I had a really big team, and I loved doing that, but it still felt a little bit small. And then I did something that I never thought I would ever do, and I started my own company. And so that's been really different. I never thought I would ever want to do that. But at this point in my career, I wanted to build, and I wanted to, make the impact that I wanted to make, and do it in the way that I wanted to do it. And so it's been really fun to build that strategy and to kind of be on the other side of the consulting piece now. I work with individuals and I work with companies, and then I can have that flexibility to do that as well. So I don't travel as much as I used to, but I still get to work with really great senior leaders and build capability in different ways. And I can tailor my time and my energy to doing that. And then also, do this too, and mentor and be a faculty and spend the time doing that, when I probably didn't have the time to do that when I was in corporate. So I've had kind of lots of different experiences, and different ones served me in different ways in my career and my life stage. But I think generally I loved every piece of it. But I find that people usually are internal consultants or they're external consultants, and they find their careers there once they find that lane. Okay, I think we had another question. Is there a capstone project instead of a thesis? Where can I find specific requirements? So really there's no capstone project, but there is a required internship. And so within that internship, you will be working on varied activities, some of which is a project. And I check in at the midpoint and then at the end of internship to really understand the goals and contributions that each student is making and how we can support them. So less so a capstone project, more so just that really rich internship experience. And in addition to the required 36 hours of coursework, part of which internship is part of that is 3 hours. What was
the program timeline link on the program website actually lists what the 8 specific psychology courses are, the 8 required psych courses. The 3 M&O courses. M&O stands for Management and Organizations within the Cox School of Business. 1 required internship, and we do have an elective as well. our students who are in this have all had some very different courses for the internship or for the electives, so some different options within the elective courses.
The next question that I see, working as an internal consultant, are you working mostly with interviewing and employee selection? Scott, you want to take that?
Happy to. It's a good question. So the way that I typically answer questions like this to my students is to imagine like 3 boxes, right? So over on my left, your right, is the internal client group. So maybe it's finance, IT, marketing, operations, whoever your group is. Over here on the other side is what's called the HR COE, the Center of Excellence. That's where those specialists sit that Dr. Eigel was talking about. Those people design the HR programs. So for example, compensation sits in there. Their job is to figure out how much do we pay people for these different jobs, right? So we want to pay them competitively so we can attract them to the jobs, but we don't want to overpay them because then you're not using your financial resources optimally. In the middle here, the middle box are the HR business partners. That's like the conduit, right? So in the COE, you're creating programs that impact the business. You're partnering with the HR generalists, the HR business partners to help make that happen, right? So your question about selection and interviewing, it's really twofold. So what you would be doing, for example, is you would create selection tools that would then be used by, well, the HRBPs would help you incorporate them into the business. So let me give you an example. So a friend of mine runs the selection team at Walmart. Walmart has approximately 10 million applicants per year at their stores, which is kind of a mind-boggling number. The highest we ever got at Best Buy was 2.5 million, but Walmart is 10 million. So his team designs the systems for all of the assessment and the interview guides and that kind of thing, which the business uses, but they personally aren't the ones that are interviewing people and selecting people. And there's a whole science behind how that's done. So when you work internally, you're basically, creating everything. And then once those programs are created, you have to implement them. And so you'll partner with the HR business partners and a variety of other folks to help actually implement that work. But you personally aren't the one doing the interviewing. Does that make sense?
I love that description. And then the other thing I would add is you're probably also, as that internal consultant, you're also potentially working with vendors or other consulting firms too, to build some of those tools. So you're not always the subject matter expert on everything, but you're finding the right consultants to work with to help meet the business need. And then you're the subject matter expert as the internal person, and usually project manager, kind of budget manager, all that kind of stuff too. Great example. All right. Just another couple of minutes for questions. And we had one last one that was submitted. Is the master's degree accredited? So the kind of the governing body of IO psychology is SIOP, the Society for Industrial Organizational Psychologists, and we have utilized their competency model and standards to build out our program. And so it is a full master's program. There's no other real accrediting body in SIOP besides SIOP. I don't know, Chris, if you want to add anything to that.
Yeah, I was going to say something about the competency model within SIOP. So this is not necessarily something where accreditation applies. It's not like we're missing something. If you're talking about, for example, master's in counseling programs, you have CACREP. That's your accrediting body that oversees the programs and makes sure that they are accredited. If you're talking about clinical PhD level psychology programs, you have a different body. For this program, we have designed this to meet all of the competencies within the SIOP training model for graduate programs, but accreditation is actually not an issue for what this specific kind of program is.
Yep. Great. Well, if there's no other questions, we just want to thank you so much for this rich discussion, and thank you so much for faculty for joining, and for students for sharing their experiences, and for everyone for all of your questions. We really are excited to hopefully meet you and see some applications come through. Remember, the deadline is March 31st, and please feel free to reach out at the email orgpsych@smu.edu if you have any further questions. And thank you so much.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, y'all. Take care.